Good evening to all. This is the fourth session of the Faculty Development Program organized by East Wing, Directorate of Distance Education, Annamalai University. We are fortunate to have Dr. Sebastian Joseph, Professor of History, Union Christian College, Alava, Kerala, as a resource person. Professor Sebastian Joseph is known for his eminence in history. He has obtained his MA History degree from University of Kerala, ranked top and secured Kerala State Merit Scholarship. And then he obtained his PhD degree working on forest history. He has been also awarded Charles Wallace Grant of British Council for his academic visit to England. He has presented a number of research papers in academic forums on environmental history, oral history, filmic history, and family history. He has designed syllabi for the environmental history for Kerala University, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kottayam, and Sri Sankaracharya University, Kerala. Currently, he supervises a number of candidates for their degree leading to PhD on the topics environmental history and oral history. It is special to note here that Professor Sebastian Joseph has made more than 25 web presentations on social distancing, pandemics, environment, man and mind in the COVID days in the recent 3 or 4 months. Really, we are fortunate to have such a wonderful academic personality, Dr. Sebastian Joseph. Now I hand over the session to Dr. Professor Sebastian Joseph. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Shankari, for the nice introduction about me. I consider this as an auspicious occasion to deliver a talk on when is a history teacher. When is a history teacher, actually this title may seem to be a little ambiguous or disillusioning to someone of you who have already become history teachers. We are all history teachers. So when is a history teacher is a lecture that is designed and conceived to transmit certain messages, certain sensibilities that a historian is out to inculcate in their minds. A history teacher finally has to develop into a historian. That is my broad ambition in giving this lecture. I will, as per the request of Professor Shankari, I will be shifting to a PowerPoint presentation for your convenience after a brief introduction about the problem that I am going to discuss here. All of you know that the subject which we teach is definitely a very significant discipline, crucial for a national integration or even for global integration. History, the discipline becomes in that sense a therapeutics in itself. History has got a healing capacity which no other discipline possesses. History is really different from other disciplines. I don't want to claim that history is a mother of all disciplines or father of all disciplines. Some people say like that. There is no mother and father to knowledge. There are different knowledge perspectives in that sense. But I wish to tell you that history is a very different subject, a very different discipline, which walk on a very different terrain and a domain. And this terrain and domain is not applicable to any other sciences or even social sciences. But even then, we know that, usually people, general public and policy makers and administrators, they have always tried to affix a secondary status to history and those who study history and teach history. That's actually a burden on us. But that burden becomes a possibility and a prospective, situation when we ourselves invent the real history teacher in us through realizing the nature and scope of the discipline. Perhaps there is no other discipline in the world which is having this much of a scope, but varied in nature. History and historical themes oscillates, fluctuates. Historians are rather on a very slippery ground because we are studying in the past. We are not studying about the present. We are not studying about chemicals, or we are not studying about machines, which has got a fixity. But we are studying about certain things which have no fixity at all, no shape in some sense. There is no form. We have to shape it. We have to give form to it. We have to give voice to the past in that sense. So, historian is actually a person who transmits voice to the past through giving meanings to the artifacts, the so-called evidences and primary, secondary, or tertiary sources which we elaborate in our classes and which we come across in our daily historical life in that sense. But the basic utilitarian aspect of the society always judges this discipline from the vantage point of view of utility. What is the utility of studying history? There is a utility for studying chemistry. Then what is the utility of studying history? What is the utility of studying history when compared to computer science or physics or commerce? This is a question that is usually aired at the students who choose history as their discipline. I think everywhere in India, in Kerala, it so happens that when a student of an undergraduate program, after taking history, is going to meet his friends or relatives, then they ask, what is your subject optional for the degree? It's history. Then immediately the question comes, so you didn't get any other subject? This is the question that is usually posed to the history student. Naturally, the student's head goes down, he bows down in that sense. Why? Because that is the particular social attitude towards history, historical discipline. And you might have read from various sources and books that, history developed in social sciences as the first discipline. But even now struggles to become in the first in that sense. In that sense, I say. Because there is, always the nation states right from the last decade of the 18th century and then all throughout the 19th century, always tried to give more what you call weight and weightage to disciplines like economics, law, and statistics, which were usually considered as state sciences. A state science usually support the state mechanism or the nation state mechanism in projecting the so-called development or progress which the nation state achieve in various realms. So economics, they usually project the GDP, the per capita income, things like that. The sociologists come with certain social facts in that sense, law produces a meaningful engagements for the nation state in codifying laws, regulations, things like that. So what is the use of history? So there is a general tendency, something like, a negation towards history and historical discipline in various times. I think there is a change in the attitude of the public towards history these days owing to certain factors. Now people, I think all over the globe, are reading history books in order to understand what is Black Death, what is plague, what is quarantine, at what point of time social distancing started, things and so on, things like that. So now it has become very relevant. But once this pandemic crisis is resolved, naturally the same old position will be revived. So what are the reasons for that? Can you locate yourself in finding certain reasons for this kind of negligence that the public is showing to us? History is an important point which I project as a convenient, just as a rubric for, or a springboard for my talk on when is a historian born. Historians are born, some are unborn, some are yet in the process of being born. So we are in different status quos, I consider myself as a history teacher, yet to born, because I am only exploring and inventing certain pedagogical or certain methodologies through which I can better transmit the message of history, the significance of history to my students. But I wish to tell you that I am very proud to say that I am a history teacher. Once, while I was traveling in a train, a person in a safari suit, who was sitting next to me, it was an AC compartment, not much noise was there. He asked me, what is my job? I said, I am a teacher. What is the subject that you are teaching? I said, I am teaching history. Then he asked me, what is the use of history? That was a question that immediately came from him. What is the use of teaching history? He being an engineering graduate, an aged man, about 70 to 75. I am posing this question that is asked by this particular man during a train journey. I am posing it here, and I will give answer to that, give my own perspective to that by explaining in what way we need to respond to such questions. So here I would like to share my PowerPoint presentation with you for your convenience. I'm going to share that 1 minute. I think you can see my PowerPoint here. So when is a history teacher born? The title of the lecture may seem somewhat intriguing in the sense that, people may think that whether I am a history teacher or not a history teacher in that sense. So whatever be that, I would like to proceed with my presentation. 1 minute. So rather, I would like to pose a different question to you. How is a history teacher in higher education or is different? So this lecture is intended to transact my thoughts or thought processes to a group of participants, teachers who are teaching at the UG, PG, and even at MPhil and PhD level. How is a history teacher in higher education is different from other teachers? By various means, we are a very different species in that sense. We think that our subject is a very easy subject. Many of the people think that history is a very easy subject, very common subject, which everyone can understand. But whether such understanding leads to knowledge production is a question that we need to ask ourselves. So
Sir, your voice is not audible, sir. Kindly make sure your network connection, sir. Sir, hello. Yes, sir. Now it's okay, sir.
The thing is that this is on my phone.
Sir, please share your screen, sir.
The screen is not shared there.
Not, sir. Not, sir. Please share your screen again, sir.
Okay, please. I will connect it now. Share now. Yeah, kindly add, the connection, my connection from my laptop. Santosh sir.
Yes, sir.
Please kindly, I'm going to get my connection through the laptop again.
Okay, sir. I make you as a co-host, sir. Please proceed, sir.
Yeah, please.
You just click on this share screen.
What is happening?
That green button, sir.
Yeah, I will do it right now.
Okay.
Because I am trying to get connected through the.
Yes, the connection was somewhat problems.
Check network. Close ചെയ്തിട്ട് ലീവ് ചെയ്തേ വരുന്നില്ലേ? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Santosh sir. Can I join through the laptop again?
Okay, sir. You can.
But it is showing connecting, but it is not getting connected.
Yes, sir. Kindly check your network connection, sir. Network connection on your laptop. Kindly check your network connection, sir. Or else you can share your screen via mobile also, sir.
No, that's okay. It's okay. I'm coming.
Okay, sir.
Is it okay now?
Is it okay, sir? Now share your.
So now I will. Sorry. I share the screen. I will share the screen. Now it's okay, Santosh.
It's fine, sir. Fine, sir.
I'm really sorry. Some technical problem.
No problem, sir.
So how is the history teacher and his higher education program is different, because most of the teachers, who are participants in this session are teachers of UG, PG, MPhil, and PhD. So you have to understand that you are not a normal teacher who is teaching in the school or in the higher secondary. You are a teacher who is supposed to promote knowledge creation of history. Historical knowledge is to be created. So in that sense, I consider history teacher in higher education program as a very different person, a very different teacher in that sense. So my implication is, here, something regarding to the knowledge production that is to happen in a classroom, be it a college or a university, whatever be the affiliation status of the institution, how the history teacher promote, stimulate, and transact a kind of teaching inside the classroom, in the campus, and in relation with the students, even outside the campus, how that leads to knowledge creation. This is the objective of the present talk. So first thing, I am enlisting certain factors or certain steps for becoming a good history teacher. One is realizing the discipline. It is different from understanding the discipline or knowing the discipline. One has to realize the potential of the discipline oneself. In what way one can attain this particular realization is a very serious thought which we are engaging now. Realizing the discipline. For example, I am showing before you a picture, a photograph. You can locate the sun here. In science, you can define the sun uh, in a very technical manner, scientifically objective manner. The language is different. The treatment of sun is different. The approach towards defining the sun is different. So just for your sake, for understanding how to distinguish and differentiate history from the sciences, or all the technicalities, we need to look at the sun. Now you look at this statement. The sun is a huge ball of swirling gas. It is mostly hydrogen gas and helium gas. Gold, iron, and all other elements that are found on Earth are also present in the sun. But the sun's heat keeps them in form of gases. These gases press incredibly towards the center of the sun. So the focus is on the gases. This pressure causes tremendous heat. So what is the next result? We are all sure about that. It will definitely fuse together and combine towards the sun's center, which is a process which we scientifically call as nuclear fusion. Okay? And this fusion causes a huge nuclear reaction, like an explosion of millions of hydrogen bombs, giving us great amounts of heat and light. This is a very, very objective scientific narrative about the sun. The sun can be defined through a scientific lens only through a particular narrative. People are happy with this narrative because factually it is correct, scientifically, because it has got a scientific connotation. And the narrative is also, you can see from the statement here, the words here are so accurate and precise. Something like, what Newton calls about the scientism. If you follow scientific procedural formalities, then you land up in a scientific way of narrating things where things are objective. Truth, this is truth in that sense for science. But there are also other ways of defining sun. In literature, there is a different way. In history, there is a different way. I am going to showcase before you another definition of sun or approach to a sun in humanities in that sense. You can look at sun from a very different perspective. Your approach to a sun differs here. In what way? In the words of William Blake, I quote, "My mother taught me underneath a tree, and sitting down before the heat of day, she took me on her lap and kissed me, and pointing the east began to say, 'Look at the rising sun, there God does live, and gives his light and gives his heat away, and flowers and trees and bees and men receive comfort in morning, joy in the noonday.'" This is a life-world experience of the sun in the life world of a mother who is trying to give food to the child by looking at the sun and kissing the child. And in a very different narrative, the same sun is expressed here and compared to God, because sun is giving us light and heat with which we can live on earth. The earth is a beautiful planet because of this sun god in that sense. So this is a very different kind of, narration. The narrative, of course, encompasses in it certain sensibilities, certain emotions, certain approaches from the life world, and not from a scientific point of view or a scientific way of describing things. So subjects do differ in transacting knowledge based on the methodologies of the disciplines. So our subject is a very different subject. It is not like the narrative in science that we are going to describe things like, E is equal to mc squared. That is not the way in which we are going to discuss things, or nor through a mathematical analysis. We cannot describe certain things in historical analysis through this kind of scientific narrative, because our concern and our problem are beyond the scope of this kind of a simple narrative in science. In that sense, history is a very complicated subject in that sense, because it looks into the emotions, sensibilities, it looks into agony, disillusionment, happiness, fear, all kind of emotions, come and converge in a document. A document is not just a reflection of a certain scientific attitude towards one's life, but it points to a network or constellations of behavior, actions, deeds, and differences in that sense, like the gender, continental or racial or regional differences in that sense, which used to be enmeshed in a language which is very different from the science. So interestingly, this is actually a definition that is given to theoretical physics by John Passmore. It is very interesting to look at. Santosh, can you hear me? I think, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can proceed, sir.
Thank you. So when you look at this picture, this married couple, the fact that the woman we love is a cloud of electrons should not stop us conversing with her as soon as we start reading theoretical physics. So the person who is sitting next to you can be explained as just a cloud of electrons. So whether the person who is so intimate to us sitting next to us is a cloud of electrons, okay, she or he can be explained and analyzed in terms of this scientific notion, but that is very different. So our subject is different from that. It goes beyond the theoretical physics to explain the relations between a husband and a wife, between a man and a woman, between a father and a daughter, or a child, in various forms, which are very different in that sense. So that leads to understanding that our discipline is a very complicated discipline. Our discipline is not simple. What we need is a rigorous teaching method. What we need at the same time is a rigorous scientific method, scientific within quotes. I will explain that. I will explain that with the help of a milk sharing. Now, all of you take your notebooks or paper and write this mathematics. This is a simple mathematics for you, even though history teachers are poor mathematics students in that sense. But this is very simple. I have simplified it for you, for your understanding, also for my own understanding. Now imagine that there are two houses as neighbors. In one house, there is a father, mother, and a child. Child is a daughter who is studying in 8th standard. In the other house, the adjoining house in the neighborhood, there are also three people, one father, mother, and a girl child who is studying 8th standard. So when I ask you how many people are there, usually we have a tendency to add and say that there are 6 people, but I never asked you to count the people in both the houses. Okay, right? So there is an assumption which comes automatically into our mind. This is a mathematical trick of adding and subtracting like that. So okay, well and good. Okay, let it be 6 persons in that sense. 3 plus 3 is equal to 6. And how many gender-wise? There are 4 female and 2 male. Okay. Now, okay, agreed. And now the next thing is that in one house there is one cow. In the other house also there is one cow. And both the cows, one cow yields 1 liter milk. The same, the other cow in the other house also yield 1 liter milk. So together is 2 liter milk. But in one house you get 1 liter milk. Okay, right. So one day the cow accidentally pushed the vessel into which the milk was taken. The mother or father was milking the cow. One cow accidentally kicked the vessel and the entire milk was spoiled. So the mother became very frustrated and disillusioned, but she wants to give milk to her daughter before she leaves to this, she make a leave to this school. So she went to the fencing, to the boundary, and called upon the other mother, and she came for her help. She asked, requested the mother to give her some milk. Immediately she went to her house and came back immediately she came again problem here. This is the first time I'm expressing multi problem here. Can you listen to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But your laptop.
Only thing is only thing is that I cannot share the this.
Yes, 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 sir. Through mobile only.
Close
You can speak with us.
So I am with my lecture. So it's actually a trouble for me. Put off that thing. Put off here. So what happened was that, see, when I ask you a question, where is that? Is it coming?
Yes, sir. Continue, sir.
So if I ask you, what is the percentage of milk shared by the neighbor mother to this mother who lost the milk, naturally the answer will come 30%. Because 1 liter is the milk that is actually the total quality, the volume of milk that is, that usually the woman receive. Okay, right. So there ends mathematics. The 30%, I think you got the message which I am transmitting. That is, the mother shared the milk in a 300 ml Coca-Cola bottle. Okay, right. And there the mother used to get only 1 liter milk. So now it comes to 30%, the milk shared. There ends mathematics, there ends commerce, there ends economics, there starts history. Why the mother shared? So there is a question behind that. There is a problem behind that. So this milk sharing example is very important for understanding the problem, the complexities of the subject which we are studying. Only if we realize this particular problem, we will be able to understand that history is a very difficult discipline. It's a complex discipline entangled in a mixture of methods and methodologies, entangled in different approaches and perceptional modalities. So this milk sharing will definitely help you to understand realize the potential of the subject, the scope of the subject. Second is developing a passion for the discipline. Once you realize that your subject has got the potential to explain a phenomena which is beyond the reach of economics or sociology or physics or chemistry, naturally your confidence is boosted. Okay, when I used to narrate this particular example inside the classroom, you see, entire class got, they got what you call stimulated in some sense that, oh, our history is beyond these common perceptional modalities. It is not a chronology. It is not a linear thing of, explanation and analysis. So then there comes the interest in the subject. Because you are confident that, okay, well and good, I can solve certain complex social problems. I can solve certain complex historical problems because my methodology is historical methodology. There, this craving desire for the subject leads to development of passion in you. If you are not a passionate history student, you are never a passionate history teacher. Because there is a train of inheritance. What is a train of inheritance? I mean, implicate here is that you are a teacher with an engine that is history, and you have got certain wagons comprising of certain methods, methodologies, certain knowledge perspectives, certain complexities, things like that. Okay, but you need to depart. You need to depart. You need to unlock certain wagons and add new wagons to your discipline train in that sense. The discipline itself is a train in that sense. Only then you will be able to reach different platforms through the discipline. And you need to explore the platforms. No, you need to get down at the platform and go out to see what is the world there. So a train, I think you have seen that train leads you to a platform and you are alighting down there. If you remain in the platform, you are not going anywhere. So some of us are remaining in the platform. We think that that is the world before us. You need to go out. You need to go into the city, into the village, and to see what sort of knowledge is there for you. So the platforms, in that sense, it is not just the railway platform. You can create your own platforms that are given to you by the discipline in various areas. So many platforms for you. So based on that, your passion for the discipline history increases day by day. Your confidence with history increases day by day. And then now you can have a life with the discipline. Are you living with this discipline is a problem that we need to understand. You can have a romance with the discipline. You can go for a coffee with history. You can take history by your bedside. History is everywhere. Wherever you go, you look at things from a history teacher's point of view. Your perspective starts changing. Because history is nothing but it is a bundle of perspectives. Perspectives are valid perspectives, reasoned through or culled out through reasoned imagination. Reasoned imagination, not just imagination of a novelist or a short story writer, reasoned, well-trained imagination. Now history is beside you in that sense. Once you are a passionate teacher, once you are a passionate lover of history, then you become a passionate teacher of history. Now, what is the equation is that passion leads to research, and passion leads to research, specialization, and creation of perspectives and knowledge. So I told you that history is nothing but a science of perspectives, a social science of perspectives. I wish to place before you an example that is explicated by Michel Foucault. When you are asked to throw a glass on a which is placed on a table, some 30 students are there inside the classroom. One student is coming and throwing the glass to the floor, and it is broken into pieces. And now the teacher is asking the students to rearrange the glasses into the former form, that is the glass. So most of the students will come and try to rearrange that, and they may not be able to get at the real physical property that existed before throwing it onto the grounds. But perhaps they may get an image, something similar to the glass. Now you think like this: none of the students are there, only you are there, okay? And you are throwing the glass in the classroom, onto the floor, and the students are invited. And the students have no idea about what was this particular thing before, getting it into pieces, or breaking it into pieces. They came, they used their own imagination, and they manage. Someone of them come with, something like a glass. Someone of them come with something like a cup. Someone of them come something like, paperweight in that sense, This is what is the difficult and most complicated job of historian, because what is left behind us, left before us, are certain nuances, certain fragments, certain artifacts of the past. Only if you use your imagination, reasoned imagination, you will be able to craft that together. This is not the case with the chemistry teacher. All the chemical things are there. For a mechanical engineer, all the machines are there, the systems are there. So that is a very different thing. But for the historian, You have to work from the void. It is the null. Nothing is there. You have to recreate that. So that is a perspective ultimately. The perspective is not a very commonsensical term. The perspective is not a usual term. Perspective is a well formulated, what you call, judgment, analysis, finding through an analysis. Then it gathers the importance, the nature of a knowledge in that sense. Now, passion, realizing the discipline and developing the passion will definitely lead you to invent a field. You have to say that you have a field. What is the field of research that you are engaged in? Suppose someone is asking you, you cannot say that world history is my field. World history can never be your field because your field is a micro area. If world history is your field, then it must be something related to, for example, something related to pandemics, history of pandemics. It's also coming within world history. But world history is a vast area. So you can see that your classroom as a teacher, your classroom is the field where you can constantly invent your field, constantly reconfigure your field with your classroom experience. As teachers, we need to understand this. There are so many examples for this. The best example is the most celebrated historian who has written a wonderful, amazingly wonderful history book by the name The Sapiens. I think you have read Sapiens, written by Yuval Noah Harari. Yuval Noah Harari, he is a teacher, he's a professor in the Hebrew University in Israel. So when I went through his biography, I saw that, actually he teaches world history, history of civilizations for his postgraduate students. That must be one reason why Yuval Noah Harari came up with a brilliant book, Sapiens. Sapiens is not the history of Africa. It is not the history of Asia. It's a history of the entire world in that sense, through a different perspective. How he explains the role of sapiens in creating and recreating different kind of stories, which we call as histories. Amazingly wonderful work. Now you take the case of Fernand Braudel, another historian, French annal historian, who used to interact with his students in Sao Paulo in Brazil. One of the major reasons why he shifted to this Mediterranean is the reason that he was a teacher of world civilization, world history in Sao Paulo in Brazil in the university. So the classroom turns out to be a space, a special dimension for a thorough reading and reflexive thought process in that sense. A historian needs to be a thorough reader of things. A history teacher needs to be a thorough reader of histories, and also he needs to be reflexive in that sense. So in the classroom also, it also gives you an immense possibility getting exposed to the various sources of varied nature in that sense, various sources in that sense. Because he is mediating, the teacher is mediating and negotiating a problem through the students, Perhaps the teacher is going there with 10 sources. Perhaps he may get 10 or 20 sources from the students. So there is a chance that your sensibility of history, your perception and modality of history is actually reconfigured and reinforced, so that you become, you gather strength and grip in the field where you are doing your work. So there, this may lead to some preliminary writings on your part. I'm not saying that you are gathering everything from the classroom, but a classroom experiences and the constant relation between the students, very critical kind of discourses taking inside the classroom, may land you at a particular problem when you start writing something. Then you are again coming to the classrooms. All these major historians, they have studied well in the classroom, they have interacted with the students, and I think you can see from the preface of most of these books, historians are writing about their fruitful interaction with the student community, especially the postgraduate and the research scholars in that sense. So the field that you maintain, the field that you consolidate, it is having its reflexivity from the kind of academic culture you are transacting inside the classroom. Because there is a possibility inside the classroom, if you are a good teacher, to open yourself to the critiquing of the students, where the critiquing of the students of your own perspectives in that sense, lead to opening of the field to further areas in that sense. No knowledge is complete because you are not the custodian of a truth statement in that sense. You are only the custodian, a momentary custodian of a statement, which is liable to change at any time. So this particular fallibility, the fallibility of knowledge that is created by ourselves inside the field, that is again proven inside the classroom, because classroom in that sense is the best place for interaction and experienced learning in interaction with the student community. So as a teacher, you need to consider this fact as a very important fact, that most of the deliberations and discussions happening inside the classroom may turn out to be a very positive stroke for you to strengthen your arguments, to solidify your arguments, and make a stay in your field in a better manner. So this is the third feature of a good history teacher. I mean, certain processual formalities through which the history teacher is mentored. Now, history teacher, every time a good history teacher is a problem maker inside the classroom. By problem maker, I mean research problem maker, not other problem maker for the management for the university, but a research problem maker. So one has to understand what is a problem and how does historical problem differ from other problems in that sense. Okay. So what is actually a historical problem? A historical problem is not like the problem that we have already seen from the point of view of a chemistry teacher or a physics teacher or an economics teacher. Rather simple problems they are working with, but we are working with problems which are beyond the perceptual modalities of other teachers belonging to sciences or any other social sciences. So a problem is actually something like a certitude, a doubt regarding your standpoint epistemology about an event or a system or a viewpoint in that sense. That is actually a problem. Once, a person came to discuss with me PhD thesis, then I asked him, what is the problem? He very furiously looked at me as if I am trying to find some problem with him. So actually I was asking for the problem. Then I asked him, what is your theme? What is your subject? Only then he came to his right senses and started explicating his problem. But up to that time, he has not developed a problem in that sense. So every time in the classroom, problems emerge in that sense, problems, because even one sentence that you utter inside the classroom can invite problems in that sense. Because suppose if there are some students who contest your viewpoint or judgment or perspective, then that becomes a problem. A problem is a well thought out, research question that can be addressed through a methodology in history, be a descriptive or analytical or a postmodernist methodology, whatever be the methodology, then that becomes a problem. There is ample scope in that sense for making problems inside the classroom while you are delivering a lecture in Indian history or Kerala history or history of Tamil Nadu, whatever be the histories that you teach inside. Because the same quality, this problem-making quality of the teacher is being transmitted to the student also. There is a spread effect in that sense, The student also, he will not believe with blind eyes, some of the problems that are stated by the teachers, some of the statements that are made by the teachers in that sense, So every statement, is ambiguous. Every statement, in that sense is not having a full stop. It is just having a comma in that sense. It is to be added. So in that sense, your culture of problematizing historical events or occurrences or processes leads to a transmission, a kind of transmission to your students. So the whole class in that sense attain a culture of, this research in its due course. So the most important fifth factor is that transcending the discipline boundaries in that sense. One has to transcend the discipline boundaries. I'll be taking in detail on 9th about interdisciplinary teaching. So here one must understand what is discipline, what is multidisciplinary method. People say that multidisciplinary is interdisciplinarity. Of course, there is some element of going to other discipline, but multidisciplinary thinking or pedagogy is disciplinary itself. Then there is pluridisciplinary. In that sense, you take sociology or take political science in order to elaborate a problem in the classroom. That is pluridisciplinary teaching. You are taking from one or two subjects in that sense. Then it is transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary has attained a very important, significant turn in these times when your subject is going transdisciplinary, permeating into other areas. For example, especially what is happening in the digital history scenario. Digital history has emerged as, a separate transdisciplinary kind of method where the historical discipline, the historical methodology, as well as the computational methodology is integrated in order to produce different forms or narratives in historiography. That's a very different kind of transdisciplinary exercise. But interdisciplinary exercise is largely a higher cognitive kind of academic exercise where you take methodologies and perspectives from various disciplines and address a research problem. But finally, the particular topic or subject that you come out with, you try to explain, belongs to none of the disciplines, like Roland Barthes says. Interdisciplinarity is a kind of methodological invocation where disciplinary strategies and methods are drawn from various disciplines, and these are integrated into a different discipline, but the resultant discipline or the end product discipline will not have any resemblance to any kind of disciplines from where the methodologies are drawn. It remains apart in that sense. So a truly interdisciplinary kind of, methodology can be evolved finally in the classroom, because the students should get a feel that this teacher is not history specific in that sense. He is a teacher who can move to economic history methodology, who can move to politics, who can move to botany, who can move to physics, things like that. Okay, right? That gives the strength that stimulates the students also to move in that direction, sir. Because cubicalization of knowledge is a very bad happening inside the classroom. I'm not saying that all the lectures are to be interdisciplinary in that sense. In certain lectures, you need to showcase that taking a cue from psychology is very important. Why do you teach a portion on madness and civilization, the great work of Michel Foucault? You need to understand what is psychology, because Foucault's doctorate, Foucault's post-graduation in psychology, and his doctoral dissertation is also comes under psychohistory. So one need to understand the basics of psychology when you transact Foucault inside the classroom. So you are going not interdisciplinary in that sense, you are going transdisciplinary in that sense. Okay. So the student get a feeling that some of the historical problems can be worked out in this manner, which will definitely provide new meanings, new insight into the areas, the themes which we study. This can be explicated with a best example of a sentence that is usually narrated by Noam Chomsky, the great structural linguistic. The chicken is ready to eat. You just look at the sentence, chicken is ready to eat. Okay. At 6 a.m. in the morning, this sentence produces a different meaning, where the chicks are ready to eat. Your mother is going to feed the chicks. Okay, right? At 1 noon, you are going to eat the chicken because chicken is fried there. It becomes a dish. At 1 a.m. in the morning, after a long tour excursion, the students gather for a campfire. And after completing the campfire, they go for taking food. And when, a very bulky boy is coming to take the food, some of his friends standing in a corner pointing to the boy, saying that chicken is ready to eat. So this same single sentence is producing 3 different meanings when that is contextualized. So this thing a teacher has to bear in mind. Whatever you utter inside the classroom, based on the perceptions or emotive heuristics of the students who are sitting inside the classroom, the meaning that you try to transmit may be another meaning when it reaches the student. Something like the death of the author, the death of the teacher, and the birth of the student, you can say it like that. So this happens when a meaning is produced, very different meaning is produced, which is significantly a very variant form of meaning that the student is getting. So don't consider that your discipline lives in a cubicle-like thing. you have to deconstruct, you have to dismantle these cubicles to go to other terrain, other domains, in order to explicate a sentence in a more fruitful manner. Any statement can be explicated like that, for which you need to transcend the discipline boundaries in that sense. You have to figure out new boundaries, discipline boundaries, in order to augment a historical problem. I'm not saying that this is to augment a problem from psychology or economics, but to augment and to explicate very well, analyze very well a problem in history. Now, the next thing, a characteristic trait of a history teacher is that history teachers are ought to be critical observers in that sense. By critical observer, I mean not commonsensical observer of things, critical observer, a keen observer of the life world, one who learns from the present and go to the past in that sense. I can cite an example in the life of Fernand Braudel. I think most of the participants here are knowledgeable about Fernand Braudel. And Fernand Braudel was an annal historian. He wanted to write a history book that is starting with Philip II and ending with the Mediterranean. Philip II and the Mediterranean was a title that he first gave for his book. Then he went to Africa, that is in Algiers, in a French colony. And he was standing by the side of the sea, that is the Mediterranean. And at the very moment in the life world, things are happening. This is a chance in history of a history teacher. So Fernand Braudel, while he was looking at the sea, the Mediterranean from a far off distance, he found that the Mediterranean turned upside down in that sense. This sight was very important for Fernand Braudel. It made significant change in the mindset of Fernand Braudel. Because the Mediterranean which he used to see from Europe is not the Mediterranean which he saw from Africa or from Algiers. It's a very different kind of Mediterranean. So he came to understand that, so Mediterranean also encompasses other boundaries, other areas like Africa. Then when he went to Brazil, he found that the Mediterranean is very different, integrating or combining with the Atlantic in that sense. So the world of Mediterranean was broadened in the mind of Fernand Braudel. And finally, because thanks to this particular kind of observation, critical observation, Braudel decided to write a history textbook entitled The Mediterranean and the Mediterranean World in the Age of Philip II. You see, Mediterranean came to the first and Philip II went to the third, the last part of the title. So this is the result of the observation of Fernand Braudel. And Braudel himself attested this particular observation in his personal testimony. In a journal he wrote in response to demands from his friends and fellow men, he wrote an article which is entitled Personal Testimony. In the personal testimony, Braudel talks about this kind of a sight which transformed, SIGHT, sight which transformed his mindset in writing a new book. It happened like that. Everywhere you get an opportunity. Why Romila Thapar is the greatest historian of India in some sense. She used to travel all over India. Her father was employed in military, in army. He was an army officer. And she used to travel a lot, hear so many, got opportunity to hear so many stories, traditions, customs and cultures she interacted with. Finally landed in writing in 1965, one of the best written history book, History of India, Volume 1, where you can see a pluralistic India in all its diversities projected as the theme of Romila Thapar's work. You can see also the critical observer in Yuval Noah Harari. If you browse the net, you can see that he is the only historian who is interacting with, almost all the contemporary problems in that sense. When you search for historians' attitude towards the coronavirus, Yuval Noah Harari is there with 100 interviews and 100 lectures in that sense. So everything that is happening in the present, has much meaning for the past. And the historians usually go back to the past and then come back to the present in that sense. So as a critical observer, a teacher can definitely transact a different kind of syllabus inside the classroom. And this triggers the world of critical observation of the students also. So once I chanced to see an advertisement board while I was traveling to my college. The advertisement board is like this. It is written, pre-owned cars showroom. Pre-owned car showroom. I was thinking, Any old car is a pre-owned car. Then why they are writing it pre-owned car? Because they wanted to diminish the significance of the old there. They want to project the idea of new. A pre-owned means it is not old. People think that a pre-owned means the old is not directly coming there. But about 20 years before, it was something different. Used car showroom. Even now you can see used car showroom. But 20 years before that, prior to that, it was the old car showroom. So this transmission from the old to the used to the pre-owned makes a sensibility for the historian in order to understand the impact of globalization on the lives of the people. The coming up of, the automobile industry, why the ambassador was considered to be an old, now it is considered to be a pre-owned in that sense, So such cultural taggings which come in our daily life, every day we are coming across these kind of observations, these kind of motives, which has to trigger the imagination of the critical observer and historian. So it's a duty of the teacher to look around, to see and study from the neighboring areas, his own life world, his own official world. He can learn a lot of things from there. So the next criteria that I implicate is that the teacher should be a critical observer in that sense. Now, coming to the turn in the archives, I used to tell that, the teachers should consider again the archives, the field, and the memory site as sacred in that sense, The teachers, why they transact sources, why they transact classes, something related to sources, they have to give a sacredness to this archives field and the memory. Sacredness is not the sacredness which we usually mean. The sacredness means, for a scientist, the laboratory is a sacred space. It is devoid of any impurity in that sense, okay, like that. It is not the holy sacred that I implicate here. That's why I have given it within quotes, inverted commas. The sacred archives and the field of memory is a breathing space for the historian and the teacher. And the history teacher in that sense is a rescuer of sources of the past. And his own experiences with the sources, when he discussed that inside the classroom, the experience, markedly make the history teacher different in that sense, So a student should come to know that this person is not a normal teacher in that sense. I don't mean that he's an abnormal teacher. Normal teacher in that sense, one who is in the know of things about the archive. The archive or the archaeological field and the memory sites for an oral history teacher are very important factors for the students to emulate sensibilities and a culture of research, looking at the archival character of the teacher in that sense. So a teacher who continuously hunt for sources and come to the classroom with new sources, new evidences, and new perspectives in that sense, actually, the fragrance of archives is disseminated inside the classroom. So you can bring the archive, that is my point, you can bring the archive into your classroom. The archive is not just an outside thing, but it's an inside thing for the history teacher. You can take the archive into the classroom. You can definitely discuss the sources, the real original sources with your students inside the classroom. So the whole classroom tends to be something like an archive, when the archivist is not the person, the government archivist, but it is the teacher himself. So this is a model that you can emulate in that sense. So the sacred archives, the field and the memory can be replicated inside the classroom is the point that I'm trying to argue. At the same time, the history teacher is also a conservationist in that sense. Thanks to the digital platforms, the digital advancements, etc., the local history of a region can be very well documented by the history teacher with the help of his or her students. They can open, for example, something like an oral history archives in their college, which is not that much expensive in that sense. One laptop, 2 or 3 voice recorders, and one desktop is enough for opening an oral history archive. And if the teacher is following this particular idea inside the classroom, inside the college, what will happen is that the teacher becomes a conservationist in that sense. Because there is a saying that apart from the primary sources, secondary sources, and tertiary sources that are there conserved in the archives, you have number of documents next to your doorstep. It is said there is an archive next to your doorstep. So an archive is not a place, suppose something like a repository, which is in a building, housed in a building, but everywhere you can look for the archive. So developing qualities of conservation of the students and developing a culture of, conservationism of documents should become a teaching culture inside the classroom. That is the point I am trying to explicate. So in that sense, the history teacher here becomes a rescuer of culture, of all forms and genres of culture. Because sometimes your mother is your archive in that sense. Your mother is a repository of certain memorable data, memorable events in her life. Suppose the teacher, the history teacher's mother himself becoming a subject of the history teacher, and he is recording the life world, the life narrative of his mother, then that becomes an archive. Then your respect towards your mother also increases tremendously. No medical prescription can improve that particular love between your mother and yourself. Suppose you are interviewing your mother is explaining to yourself, about the traumas in life, disillusionment in life, economic hardships which she overcame, the will of the mother, things like that, how hard she lived in order to look after all of you, to earn for you, and the diseases encountered by her in her life, for example, a cancer or something like that, a deadly disease. Then the sensibility of the history teacher becomes different. At the same time, you are a history teacher, and the very same time, you are an archivist also in that sense. One who conserves testimonies, one who conserves memories, which will definitely go a long way in developing a local history archive in your college or in any institution which is around your neighboring areas in that sense. So this is the practice of history. So a history teacher is not supposed to go on teaching and teaching, but he or she can be a good conservationist also in that sense. This is the 8th point I wish to suggest to you. Then any one of you, all of you are teachers who are guiding dissertations for UG and PG, okay? You have to understand about the value of a UG and a PG dissertation. Once I read from a book that was written by Buttonstein, where he has given a footnote where he says that a leading Tamil Nadu historian, I think it is Krishnamajari or I forgot the name, actually his magnum opus work actually originated from his MA dissertation. So an MA dissertation turns out to be a final work, a book for which the historian becomes popular in that sense. So guiding this UG and PG dissertation, apart from creating a great work, it also rebuild and reconfigure the relation between the teacher, the history teacher, and the student. A new way of academic relationship begins here. And immense possibilities are there for you to collaborate with your student folk in writing a paper, in co-authoring a book in future. Or when the particular student, the PG student is coming for you to, for your guidance as a PhD student, you can start writing a number of articles. You can start finally that those may culminate in the creation and compilation of a book or edited volume in that sense. This is encounter of ideas. So what is happening is a new ideational fertility in the company of the students. So this is a culture tag of the supervising teacher. A supervising teacher who constantly interrogate, introspect, and engage with the student folk continuously. For example, if suppose a person is teaching a student from the UG onwards, if the person is there for PG and PhD, then usually 10 or 12 years are coming there, where you can create a very critical kind of relationship with that particular student. So a dissertation in that sense is the end result of a relation between the history teacher and some of the students who pursue the research, thanks to your guidance, thanks to your mentoring potentials. So research mentoring is an important criteria of the history teacher. So next time when you do a UG or PG dissertation, think that this is an opening for a great book by the student. So this is a facilitation of students' knowledge as well as collaboration and creating a new relation with the student folk these times and also in future. In the same way, you can also collaborate with your colleagues in and out of your department. So there are umpteen number of colleagues. For example, why can't a history teacher collaborate with a botany teacher for writing environmental history of a region? There are so many teachers in the botany department who think that history has no value. There are so many teachers in the history department who think that botany has no value for history. But you look at most of the environmental historians of the world, they are also great environmental history teachers in that sense, They used to study botany. They used to collaborate with conservationists, geographers, and botanists in that sense. So collaboration with your colleagues inside your department and also outside your department is an important prerequisite for you becoming a good history teacher in that sense. So one more effect of particular collaboration is that you are also spreading the value of history to other departments also. So the botany or the physics teacher comes to history and he sees that, number of opportunities are there, problems are there, which cannot be solved and resolved by the physics teacher, which can be resolved through a fruitful management, fruitful engagement with the history teacher. So the status of the discipline gets elevated there, and status of the history teacher also gets elevated there. So in that sense, you develop a culture of research in your department and college. Apart from regular, what you call chats or regular gossiping, whatever be like that, the kind of academia, the inertia, the NUE stagnation which we see in the academic circles can be overcome through these fruitful engagements. A good teacher can become a model in that sense. So you be the good teacher and improve the culture tag of research inside your college or the university. Finally, I must say that you have to publish or you yourself will perish. The history teacher used to publish something. If you are not publishing, you will become Professor MacWitt, who didn't publish, so perished. You can see from the picture, just a tombstone in that sense. Nothing is there left. If you publish something, then even after your life, your books will survive. So even now we are reading Biban Chandra, who died years back. Recently, Satish Chandra died. But how many books of Satish Chandra are there with us? Now you see in your rights, you can see Nilakanda Shastri looking at you through history of South India or the Cholas. So he published it. So a publication of a book, all these people were great teachers. Biban Chandra was a great teacher. Satish Chandra was a great teacher. Nilakanda Shastri was a great teacher in that sense, So unless and until you publish, you perish. Publish or perish. The ultimate sensibility of the historian is for ultimately you make yourself visible. Whether you are visible, the history teacher is visible is one question that we need to ask ourselves. I'm asking myself. I'm not asking you to ask that question. I'm asking myself. Whether am I visible to others? So how can you be visible? Through your lectures, through your public lectures, through your books, through your articles, through your popular magazine articles, through your articles in the newspapers, through your interviews. So try to gather such, an effective and quality research. Follow the method of effective and quality research, which makes you finally visible. And ultimately, you enter the public domain. And chances are there that you become a public intellectual. Now, how many teachers have become public intellectuals? Now you look at the great professor of history, Romila Thapar. She has become a public intellectual in that sense. Everybody looks at Romila Thapar for certain references for the present problems in India or in the world. Yuval Noah has become a public speaker, a public intellectual in that sense, So there are so many public intellectuals, like Irfan Habib becoming a public intellectual. Everywhere, people are quoting Irfan Habib, quoting Romila Thapar, quoting Yuval Noah Harari, even politicians, technocrats. Have you seen, you can see the interview of Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook with Yuval Noah Harari. You can see how certain corporate giant businessmen commented about Yuval Noah Harari's works. Bill Gates commented on Yuval Noah Harari. So the thing is that I'm not saying that this is a very projected kind of popular thing, but you can achieve this visibility only through rigorous research, because unless and until you are not a researcher, you are not a good teacher. That is the point that I wish to explicate and pinpoint, because we are told that there is a teaching research extension kind of formula which we usually fill up for the NAC or the UGC inspection teams while they come to the college and things like that. What is teaching? Teaching is to go to research. Teaching is to strengthen research, and the research has to extend. What is the extension activity of a history teacher? People are writing. We went with some children and cleared an area, which was dumped with the waste. Is that the extension activity of the teacher? History teacher? No, that is not the extension activity of the history teacher. That is the extension activity of any teacher who is in charge of the NSS or who is a social science teacher in that. But what is the extension of history teacher? You are saying that, yes, I have developed an oral history archive, a public history archive in the institution, in the college, or in the library. That is a real extension. What is your research? Your research is in oral history. Whatever be the history, you are extending that for the benefit of the community as a whole. Then that becomes real extension. That is academic extension in that sense. The other thing is extension, indeed, social extension in that sense. But when you reach out to the society, when you reach out to the community through this kind of an extension, that becomes very meaningful. And the teacher also becomes very meaningful entity in the whole of society. The whole society, the community will look forward to him, look to him. So what is his contribution? Yeah, he contributed in this sense, created an oral history archive. He created a memory archive in that sense. Thanks to him, we have a local history data archive in our college. So, and then finally what is happening that it goes reverse. Extension again goes back to research. Extension activity triggers research, and that again goes back to teaching. Inside the classroom, you are explicating, you are explaining these things before your students. So teaching goes to research, research goes to extension, and again the same thing is coming back to research, and then that will be revealed and reflected inside the classroom. So if you are a good history teacher, then you are not only a good history teacher, you are a good history teacher, you are a good researcher, and one who extends the academics beyond the borders of the institution. So this is a very important thing that you need to understand in your life. And finally, it is approaching the global world of academics and research. A totally different academic culture you have to inculcate in that sense. Once you reach this particular situation where your transmission of value, you are teaching from teaching to research to extension, come back to teaching, again to research, and again to extension, then you become very visible with your publications, with your extension activities, with your projects, things like that. Then you can approach the global world of academics and research, where you can find a very different kind of work culture. You can write in front of your door that do not disturb, busy altering reality. You have every responsibility, you have every power to say that people are not supposed to meet me from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. or 11 p.m. to 2 p.m. Why? Because you are busy. You are becoming a very busy person. You are not a normal teacher in that sense. You are not a normal teacher, but you are a very different history teacher in that sense. So now comes to the most important question of the digital historian, because this is the world of digital networks, and a lot of things we are hearing about digital technologies which lead to a very different kind of knowledge transmission inside the classrooms, like for example online classes, different platforms which we use, and different online technologies which you use, different technologies which we use like PowerPoint or any kind of smart boards with which we take the classes, whatever we like that. That is not the digital historian. That is simply digital technology. Digital historian is one who apply these digital sciences of technology for creating a data bank, for creating a particular narrative which is different from the usual textual narrative, and which are projected for the public and also for the researchers and students, is a digital historian. There are various digital history forums where you can see, for example, if you go to the site of digital history, you can see that many of the foreign universities are engaging in this kind of a study. Digital mapping. For example, an environmental historian turning to be a digital expert, he tries to relocate certain areas which were then forested areas, marshy places, which later became urban spaces. So a digital historian is one who reshapes the documents through an integration of digital technology, and through that integration and through creation of a different narrative, which is very different from the routinized textual narratives which we are seeing. There are a lot of sites, websites for which you can go. For example, the universities, especially American universities, are having this kind of stimulated history projects. Stanford University is having, Harvard is having, Victoria University is having. Then the Oral History Society of England is the best example for you to go to find how testimonies are given and how they are projected, these testimonies, which carries the emotive heuristics of the person who is giving the testimony in that sense. Because now the student who is sitting in front of you also is suffering from something like a experiment, something like a gadgetization of the human. The tech culture, the student who is just inside your classroom, he may be having large potentialities in that sense. He is a person with adequate knowledge in this kind of history online and such things. You can introduce new sources inside the classrooms for films, then paintings and pictures and photographs through which you can teach a new kind of history. So the students inside the classroom are to get a feel that apart from the conventional sources, we have got a plethora of sources which are very different. Why can't you show the history film, a Tamil film, Rikshawala, which was produced in, I think it was released in 1971, where MGR plays the role of a rickshaw puller, where, if you go through this film, many film historians have studied this film to project and see how MGR became a star and at the same time a chief minister in that sense. Okay. In particular song scene with a child, you can see photographs of Mahatma Gandhi and Kamaraj and Annadurai as hanging on the wall, to which MGR is smiling and going so close to Gandhi's film in that sense. So this film can be a motive. It can be a different source for the students to engage inside the classroom instead of listening all the history of Tamil Nadu and history of India like that. Through a star, this imagination of the history student can be broadened, like Hayden White, suggests about the employment theory. Every history is an employment. You are plotting certain themes, problems, and through these stories you are narrating, because history is also a different kind of narrative in that sense, So these kind of experiments, if you do inside the classroom, and also one more thing that you can do is a flip the classroom style. You can give lecture in advance, and then you can have discussion with the students. And for all these, activities inside the classroom, I suggest you to read a journal. You can go to this site, thehistoryteacher.org. That link is given there. You can write it down, or I can share the PPT with Professor Shankari, and you go to the historyteacher.org and find immense possibilities and prospects for the history teacher to rise above the common standards of teaching and to become a very different teacher. So many experiences are shared there. So many projects are shared there in the history teacher, which is published by the Society for History Education. You can see a number of articles there inside this journal, which will definitely retrack your teaching methodology in some sense. Now, one last word, the present times and the making of history teacher. Santosh sir? Hello? Santosh sir?
Sir. Sir, what sir?
Can I take five more minutes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is time now? I have no...
4:30. 4:30. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. We have exceeded because of the technical problem. Okay, I'm sorry. So now you think as a history teacher, the confinement is the best opportunity for you to think, ruminate, and depart from your earlier traditions of teaching. Because it was in splendid isolation, confinement that historians like Mark Bloch, Fernand Brodel, and Antonio Gramsci, that developed new themes and theories. So this is the best time to keep away from the madding crowd and to trigger your thought processes to become active history teachers in in isolation and grab this opportunity which is provided by a coronavirus in that sense. Because, don't consider that a classroom is a convenience store where you can sell everything. This is not a marketable commodity in that's an education, even though there are certain movements in the world to make it as a marketable commodity. Students are not coming to purchase knowledge, but to produce it. You need to think. So the teacher is not the absolute knowledge maker or the truth maker in that sense. So the pedagogical link inside the classroom between production of knowledge and gaining of knowledge is to be understood within the epistemology of how knowledge production happens inside a classroom, where the teacher can lead the way. No doubt, whatever be the technology, whatever be the online technologies and platforms, number of platforms with which we are familiar, the best leader inside the classroom, inside the college, is the teacher himself, who is not supposed to simplify for various reasons. Don't think that you are going to simplify things before the students. In higher education, that's why I told you in the beginning that this is about teacher in the higher education. You are not going to simplify things inside your classroom, because you have to propagate the concept of knowledge production inside the classroom. So Gramsci once said, simplification is a crime in that sense. You need to rise above the level of the ordinary students, and all the students, you have to go far ahead of the students so that the students will try hard to reach you. Being a very serious teacher, you are not supposed to simplify things. Inside the classroom, the teacher is still the best leader inside the classroom. Not the technology, no computer, no platforms, no digital devices can replace the teacher. He is the facilitator. He is the original thinker for the student inside the classroom. Not through simplification, but through projecting knowledges which are beyond the limit of the student's capacity to understand. Then only the student will rise above his own commonsensical thought processes and his own what you call inherited knowledges in that sense. So he can deconstruct the knowledge in that sense. So a teacher is supposed to go far beyond the student in order to ignite the mindset of the student to learn more and to create new knowledge systems where new truths are produced by the students. By looking at this picture, you can understand what I meant, because your knowledge and the student's knowledge is like the duck rabbit illusion. Some of you can see the duck here, some of you can see the rabbit, and some of you can see both the duck and the rabbit. This is an optical illusion which is used by Thomas Kuhn to explicate about different kinds of knowledge produced. And he used the duck-rabbit illusion to demonstrate how when such a shift occurs, you are suddenly able to see and understand a thing, a phenomena, a set of data differently, despite the fact that you are still looking at exactly the same thing as before. You are looking at the same thing, but once the context changes, the episteme changes, the meaning changes. You are looking at the same fact, same source, but once the episteme changes or the paradigm shifts, what is happening? It becomes a new knowledge, a different thing which you have not seen in the past. So this is to be understood by the history teacher. You have to produce, if you say that you are producing only the duck inside the classroom, then the rabbit is lost. You have to prove both things, to create both the duck and the rabbit inside the classroom, and let the student select either the duck or the rabbit as his knowledge in that sense. Ultimately, a historian is to be born. A good history teacher finally culminates in the making of a historian, and that leads to a progressive humanization, which is the ultimate aim of education and history makes it more attainable in that sense. So with one story, I wish to wind up this lecture, the story that is told by Professor Yashpal, who was the chairman of UGC University Grants Commission, late Professor Yashpal. The story goes like this. There is a school in a tribal area. So a person is moving in front of the school. He finds a lone student, a girl student, always standing in the veranda. And then he goes and goes, he moves beyond. Every day he's seeing in the morning at 10:20, he's seeing the girl standing in the veranda. Nobody is seen else. No other one is there, only the girl is there. And this happened for 2 or 3 days. Then he decided to follow the girl child in the evening. He followed the girl child, and the girl was moving, singing songs. It's a +2 school, and she's studying in +2, +1 or +2. And then she used to talk to the birds. She used to pluck some leaves from a plant and used to, give a, caring hand to the plant. She used to, go through the rivulets, splash the waters in the stream, and ultimately she entered a house, a hut. After 10 minutes, she came out and she asked, "Why are you following me?" The person said, "I followed you for one reason. Why you are always standing in front of the school, in the veranda at 10:20. Whenever I pass through the school, in front of the school, I am seeing you there. What is the reason for that?" She said, "My mother is sick. She has got a wound. She has got a wound on her leg. So that is why I am plucking these leaves and making that into an ointment and applying on the mother's wound. And I have to feed her in the morning. She is mentally depressed because her father deserted us. My father deserted us. So we are a deserted family now. Then whatever, speed with which I, complete my duties, I reach the school always late by 10:05 or 10:10. And the teacher always asks me to keep outside the classroom. So that's why I am standing outside the classroom. I am permitted to enter the classroom only in the second hour. And now the next question comes from the person. He asked, "Who is the teacher?" Then the girl replied, "It is the botany teacher." And Yashpal, towards the end of the story, gives the title of the story like this. Can any one of you guess? Who knows botany? Who knows botany? Whether the student who is very knowledgeable about the local ecosystem, who is plucking leaves for manufacturing and making a particular plant ointment for for her mother, who is taking care of her mother, explicating the values of human ecology, coming to the school 5 minutes, 10 minutes late, but asked to remain in the veranda. This was a question that actually irked the mindset of Professor Yashpal, a great scientist and a great educator. And he, towards the end, gives the title to the story like this: Who knows botany? And I am placing the same title with a simple modification: Who knows history? If you are not understanding the student sitting in front of you, you are not at all a history teacher. However, what sort of research legacy, umpteen number of publications you make, umpteen number of books you write, if you are not understanding the human in the student, then you are not a history teacher. And we need to ask this question: who knows history? Not who knows botany, but who knows history? Thank you very much. I stop here.
Dear participants, you can have any query, means raise your hand.
Santosh sir, I am very sorry that lot of technical hassles came on my way during this.
Okay, no problem, sir. No problem.
Actually, that led to something like an irritated situation. One is not happy with this particular network and all.
Yes. Due to network problem only, sir. So no problem on that.
Okay, if there are questions, then they can ask me directly or chat box.
Yes, sir. Just a minute. Name
Biju, that sir, unmute yourself and ask your queries.
I am not seeing any question in the chat box.
Yes, sir. In chat box, I think 2 questions are there, sir.
Participants, you can post your questions through chat box. Otherwise, raise your hand. We will unmute yours.
What is the name of the
Sir,
I-
on questions.
I can, I can, I think I can share the PPT.
Okay, sir.
What is the question? Anybody asking a question?
Yes, sir. What is the name of the film you tell?
Pardon?
What is the name of the film you tell like that?
What is the name of the film that it is actually a film that was released in Tamil Nadu with MGR as the hero. Riksha Karan.
Right, Riksha Karan. Okay, okay.
Yeah, and if you take this particular film, it's of immense possibility of a new narrative in the sense that, I think someone of you have read one of the greatest works written by M.S. Pantian, The Image Trap. It's the history of MGR. So there he comes up with these kind of insightful references of MGR, playing the role of an agricultural worker, rickshawala, all the subaltern, and ultimately how he manages to project his popularity as a political public figure in Tamil Nadu. So when a history teacher looks at these films, the meaning of the films differ from that of the meaning that is attributed to that by the filmmaker. Because one wonderful study, one article, it is not M.S. Pantian's article, one article, I forgot the author, in Tamil Nadu, he wrote on this Riksha Karan, especially pointing to certain motifs inside the film. For example, the black trousers and the red shirt of MGR depicting something somewhere near to the flag of a political party in Tamil Nadu, DMK. And incidentally, in MGR's in a room where he is singing a song with a child. As I already told you, the photographs of nationalist leaders like Gandhi, Kamraj, and another is coming and figuring. And MGR moves so closer to Gandhi and smiling at him. So these are certain metaphorical, strategies with which a star is projected as a political star in that sense. So if you play this movie inside the classroom, the environment of the classroom changes significantly, not just to see the song scenes or the dance scenes, but to understand the situation where the life world of a rickshawala or a rickshaw Karan is portrayed by the popular star of Tamil Nadu in that sense.
So one more question, sir.
Yeah.
It's possible to rewrite the modern Indian history. Whether it is possible to rewrite the modern Indian history.
Is it possible to rewrite modern
Indian history?
Who asked this question?
Anushya.
Yeah, it is possible to rewrite modern Indian history. Definitely, because no history is final. That's why I already told you, you cannot put a full stop after writing a history text. It is just a beginning. So you can start from there. The possibility is that there are umpteen number of chances and opportunities to rewrite Indian history. But you see the number of books coming in, a very, very few books are coming. Very few histories are coming. It is possible to reread Indian history from the point of view of new records. It is possible to reread Indian history from the point of view of pandemics. For example, the Spanish flu, or the cholera, or malaria. How many works have come out like that? Only very rare works have come out like that, for barring some historians like David Arnold, Only few writings are there. So it is possible to reorient and reconfigure Indian history based on old sources and also in relation to new sources. You can definitely go and take old sources, the primary sources used and left over by other historians, and you can give a new meaning to such sources, because the fact that was culled out by a particular historian can be a fiction for the upcoming historian in that sense. So in that sense, you can write. In other sense, you can definitely contribute, or you can give a variegated dimension, a different dimension to Indian history from the standpoint of history of medicine, history of forest, history of environment, history of gender. So many areas are to be explored. There is immense possibility for the history teacher to become a historian in that sense, who try to reconfigure and redefine history of modern India. Thank you for that question.
Next question, sir. Explain about what is history teacher organization.
Pardon?
What is history teacher organization? Explain about what is history teacher organization.
What is history teacher organization?
Organization, like that they are as ORG.
Is that in the chat box?
Yes, sir. What is history teacher ORG all about? Anto Richard. The participant's name. Anto Richard.
One minute, I will definitely look at that question. I am not getting that question correctly.
441.
Time 4:41.
Oh, what, I cannot. What is historyteacher.org all
Dot
about?
org.
Yeah. That is about, the history journal I cited, history teacher journal. You can have recourse to various articles. You can have recourse to various programs and projects once you click onto this org. .org. That's what I have shown that particular history teacher journal, that cover page there.
Okay.
What kind of changes we brought in history exams for assessing a student? That's a very, very important question. What kind of changes we brought in history exams for assessing a student? Very, very important question. It needs much elaboration in that sense, because usually now questions are being asked with the potential of replicating the knowledge of the teacher in that sense. Analytical questions are not coming in that sense. So new questions have to come, which will definitely trigger the imagination, the recent imagination of the student at the point of writing the examination. It is not simply like discuss an essay like nature of 1852 revolt, or discuss certain theories of Marx, something like that. Some application level questions are to be aired to the student, because the examination in that sense is to be restructured in that sense with new questions, new analytical questions in that sense. Taking the history student to a point where, as I argued, he can create a new knowledge perspective in the answer book itself. But that question is to be addressed at the time of that examination, which will not have any connection with the kind of examinations or the kind of knowledge transmissions which the student underwent in that sense. So it should be a question, very critical, clever question, in order to assess the potential of the history student to explain a phenomena from his own standpoint. Such questions are not coming because the perspective building theory, the perspective building mechanism is not that strong in the curriculum that is designed for most of the Indian universities in that sense. Children don't know ancient Indian history in 9th, 10th class because NCERT not included in books or books of secondary classes. Okay, that's I agree with that. That is the right thing which he is saying. Sir, how history helps us learn to understand other people? Definitely, history is after all about the story of humanity. If you are not knowing other person who is sitting next to you, then what history you have studied and taught? Basically, history is a discipline for understanding human relations in their social environment. So in that sense, every history that we study, for example, the history which we study regarding, for example, you take the case of Emperor Akbar. So what kind of a culture was disseminated, was spread by Emperor Akbar? And now you look at people in India, how do they go away from the vision of Emperor Akbar? So Akbar becomes a model in that sense. So you can rate and relate people with the past by going to the present. By standing in the present epistemology, you can understand these changes in human relations and how they are modulated, how they are remodulated and refugued. Because basically history is nothing but history of human relations in a particular ecosystem. Ecology is very important. That's why we often say that history is the science of men in time, the science of humans in time, with changes in the temporal dimensions, the temporal spatial dimensions, the relations also change. So Yet, as a teacher, you are teaching subaltern history. If you are not knowing the person who is working in your field, then what is the significance of subaltern history? So the value of the humanistic, organistic history, pedagogy, is to be transmitted into the life world. Then only it will help understand other people. Thank you, Sadish Ryan, for this question. Sir, is history biased in school textbooks, sir? Every history, that is taught, it has got, a tendency to be biased. I don't know whether it is biased in that sense. Some histories are definitely biased. If you go to 9th standard, 8th standard, you can see based on the interests of the state, be the nation state or the state, the affiliating states, they have certain interests, and they paint history according to their whims and fancies. Then it gets biased. But if it is a perspectival history, then it will be based on sources, rigorous authentication and verification and validation of sources. That will be a different perspective only. That is not biased. But there is a tendency among school textbooks, in some of the states in India, which has gone extremely biased by nullifying certain historical figures, by nullifying certain historical episodes, by projecting certain historical figures, things like that. So that is a really bad tendency, which can be surmised under the topic or rubric of state-sponsored history writing. That is very bad. Thank you. I think questions are over.
Okay.
One question from Raghavendra Babu. Recently, actor Prithviraj acted in the role which is based on Malabar Rebellion, but people opposed to his role. What is the opinion about you, sir? Actually, that is a very, very dangerous kind of response before the film getting released, raising objections about that. See, only once the film is released, you'll be able to understand whether it's a historical film or not. If it is a historical film, then it is based on sources in that sense. Okay? So once the film is not born, the opposition to that film, saying that particular film actor is coming and acting, is baseless, can be considered as a worst kind of stupidity in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think time is over. We have consumed much time.
Sir, we are at the final part of the session. I record my sincere thanks to Professor Sebastian Joseph, who has revealed how to become a successful history teacher and what are the requisites of a history teacher. Sir, we are awaiting for your meeting again on the last day of the program when you are going to deliver on the topic academic culture of the interdisciplinary teaching. I hope that participants would have benefited from this session, first session. And also I thank the participants for their effectual participation. Thank you each and everyone who are associating with this program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.